Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the next hour to find out how we can discuss money-related matters with kids and teenagers. When I was growing up, and I'm sure that's true for most of us, where they told us to focus on our academics and not to worry about household stuff, our parents tried to keep us and shield us from money-related matters. However, in hindsight, I realized that though our parents mean well, it can be counterproductive in the long run. Our education system teaches us how to make money, but it teaches us very little about money itself. The most we learn is about compound interest and how putting money away for a long time will compound over time and make us more money. However, I feel I learned a lot more from Monopoly. Um, but that's just me. With that in mind, we have an interesting conversation for the next hour where we talk to our two panelists and get their views and also learn from them about how we can do a better job to prepare the next generation to handle money and have a better relationship with it. But before we do that, let's start with a quick poll. Can we have the poll on screen, please? Okay, while the poll is on screen, I would like to introduce our two important panelists today. We have with us, firstly, Marilyn Pinto from Kfi Global. Marilyn decided to teach her daughters about financial literacy when she realized there was very little mention of it in the entire curriculum spanning 15 years of schooling. This led to the beginnings of Kids Finance Initiative, where over the last 4 years, KFI Global has taught more than 3,500 kids on how to be smarter about their money. She's an expert at this, and more importantly, she teaches kids in a way that is most effective and in a way that they love to learn. She has partnered with some of the biggest and most respected institutions in the region and has been regularly featured in the national press. Madeline, we really appreciate and thank you for taking the time to do this and hope to
I'm
learn some
so
secrets
glad
on
to
how
be
to
here.
talk to kids.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Madeline. Next, we have our very own Anselm Mendes. Anselm is the Executive Director of Sales and Technology at the Continental Group. Anselm is a beloved and respected member of the organization and our go-to problem solver. Not only is he an excellent team player and someone who everyone looks up to, but he's also a proud father of two teenagers. Anselm is someone I personally reach out to for clarity of thought and his openness to new ideas and opportunities, something I'm sure his kids also appreciate greatly. Thank you, Anselm, for taking the time out, and we are all looking forward to hear from you and learn from your experiences about talking to your kids about money.
Thank you, Abhishek. And I'm going to, snip that clip of yours and share it with my teenagers. I hope they can hear that and hopefully come to appreciate the same. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, well. So do we have the results of the poll yet? Okay, so I wish a lot of these were my parents because all of them apparently talk to their kids about money, which is a really great sign, by the way. So taking out from that, how important is it, Marilyn, to discuss about money? Having financial literacy amongst kids. Why is it important?
On a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
I'd say 20. So if that, if that is any indication. All right. So maybe we can start off with just a little exercise. Like, I'd like all the listeners as well to just imagine that you are 15 again. And I want you to imagine that everything is exactly the way it was when you were that age. You go to the same school, you hang out with the same friends. Everything's exactly the same, except for one thing. You now know and understand how money works. You now know how to make smart money decisions. You know how to avoid making stupid ones. You know the importance of saving. And more importantly, you know the importance of investing early in your life. I'd like you to consider what a difference this would have made to the trajectory of your life had you actually known this at 15. And, judging by most reactions when I say this, everyone feels like my life would have been drastically different. I know mine would have been as well. And that is just how important this is, because this can really change the trajectory of your life, not just financially, but I think in every aspect of your life as well. I hope that answers your question, Abhishek.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I agree completely with you. When I was growing up, I thought it was my parents' job to manage the money. It was my job to spend it. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. So, I mean, has the mindset changed today for, dealing with money or talking about money over the years?
I think so. I think in many different ways, parents are a lot more aware because financial education has really taken center stage, especially in the last year and a half with the fallout of the pandemic. I think everyone's realized that this is a topic that we need to be paying more attention to, and I think a lot more parents are also evaluating the way they do this. I think just getting from your poll, this is something on most parents' mind now. How well we do it, how often we do it. Whether what we do is effective or not, that's a whole other question. But I think, yes, it has changed. At least it has come into, I think for a long time, this was in our blind spot. And as parents, we have lots of blind spots, especially when it comes to our kids. We assume that they know about money. We assume that they are smart enough to figure it out. And this blind spot problem can be really problematic because if you don't recognize a problem, you can't take the first steps to actually solving it because you don't see it as a problem. So yes, I think that first step has been taken. People do realize that this is a problem. And in terms of mindset having changed, I think possibly, decades ago, the focus was on saving, put your money just put it in the bank and save your money. In fact, that's all we heard about saving when we were growing up, save and save. And that is, while it is really important, it's not the most important. It's not the most crucial thing. It's not the only thing that you should learn about money. There are so many more important components that you should learn about, investing being one of them, budgeting being one of them, just having a proper money mindset. So I think all of these nuances are better discussed before we approach this topic with our kids.
Right. Thank you so much, Madeline. Anselm, what are your views on the subject? I mean, how has it changed from the time that your parents talked about it with you and how you talk about it with your kids?
Yeah, I mean, if you think, I mean, and like Marilyn mentioned, I think she put together a very good exercise for us to do. I mean, close your eyes, go back to when you were 10 or 15, and think about the conversations around money that would happen in the families. Either it was, in hushed tones between parents. Money traditionally has been a very touchy subject. It's almost taboo in a sense. Many a time we hesitate. I mean, even today, I'd like to ask this question, to everyone in this audience. How many of us have actually sat down with our children and told them how much money we earn? And if we haven't, then why not? So while there has been change over time, when we were younger, it was don't spend too much money. You need to save money. Probably that was the majority part of the conversation. Today, there's so much more awareness about money, both amongst us as parents, and that the importance of it, the part and the role it plays in our lives, as well as the exposure that our children have to finance, to money. If you look at it, the amount of content consumption, just sheerly from that perspective, if you look at what we were able to consume, I mean, there was probably 1 or 2 channels when we were growing up. So the exposure to financial matters was still even more limited. Today, I mean, the children are, whether they like it or not, exposed to advertisements on sales, on shopping, on spending. So there is a lot more opportunity to have those conversations if you're so inclined. Many parents, I'm assuming, do take that. A child will say and bring up, it's on sale. Why don't we buy it? It's a good sort of entry point into having that conversation, explaining those things. So I think traditionally, I mean, if I look at it, there has been a lot of change, but some things have stayed sort of similar. The taboo that is there needs to go away. And I think about it. It comes from money is an important part of everyone's life, and the subject is a little touchy, I think, because we assign status and we assign value to it in the sense, there's power or status assigned to money. So maybe that's the reason why many of us are hesitant to sort of go in and talk freely about it, not just among our children, but even generally. But it is awareness of these aspects through webinars and seminars like this, through articles, and the work that Marilyn is doing is fantastic. That we can break the shackles of the past and sort of move forward.
Well, that actually reminds me of a very interesting question that I had next for you. But before we do that, we would like to go to another poll. It will be right up on your screen immediately. If technology works as it's supposed to. Yes, there it is. So while this question is on the poll, I find one thing interesting that you brought up is about consumerism. We are constantly clued into social media, reading, going through, celebrities' pictures about what they've bought, how they spend their money. And, we have this constant upgrade culture that we are part of. We buy the latest iPhones, we buy the latest goods. How do you deal with something like that when it comes to your kids? How do you educate them to make better choices when it comes to that? Marilyn, do you want to go for that first?
Yeah, so I think this whole aspect, and this is a question I get asked very often in terms of our kids are spoiled because of what they're exposed to, the way they react, the way they demand things, or because of peer pressure, they want so much, they demand so much, we can never keep up with that. And at this point, I always like to take a step back and say, maybe we should shine the spotlight not so much on our kids, but on ourselves, because kids aren't like fruit. They don't get spoiled because you keep them, lying around on a counter overnight. Kids get spoiled because of actions that we condone, that we encourage, or that we ignore. And if we are more mindful about talking to them about money, I am very, very certain that they will show you how mature they are, how understanding they are, and you will really be surprised. A lot of people think that I give kids a lot of credit by saying this, but I do, because I haven't seen otherwise. I have yet to be proven wrong as far as this is concerned. The issue is that we tend to not to underestimate our kids' understanding. We tend to underestimate their empathy. And I think if we actually talk to them about it, if they're actually educated in terms of getting their mindset sorted about this, in terms of consumerism, the treadmill, the hedonic treadmill, and all of these concepts, they're actually the ones who will. I've seen this with my own kids and the kids I teach. They are now smarter than money than I am, you see, because I learned it late. I still, even though I technically know the right thing to do, I'm still instinctively doing the wrong thing, just because I'm used to it all my life, right? But with these kids, because we're teaching them so young, they have grown up with this hardwired in them. They are now saying, we don't need to buy it just because it's, buy two, get one. We don't need to, we just need one. Just because we're getting a free one doesn't mean we got to go for it. And things like this, that they will really shine a light on. That's a very different perspective, a very educated perspective. So I think we should give our kids a lot more credit than is usually done.
Yeah, I think even I would like to say that to my parents if I was 15 again, and I'm smarter than you think I am. So,
Yes,
why don't you?
that's exactly
And
true.
and as I was growing up, and today when I look back, I feel I could have made better choices. And maybe if my parents were open with me about money and things like that, I would have also not insisted. I hope I didn't throw too much of a tantrum, but I mean, it would have, I think, been better if they were open with me about money since the beginning.
Absolutely, because then you're collaborating with them. Then you feel like, you're collaborating to help. And I don't, like I said, I haven't come across, I've done this for 5 years now. I haven't come across teenagers who have gone through this program and still think, believe, or behave in that way. It's just not possible. The only reason that it's happening is because they don't understand this. I call this, this is what we call an unconscious incompetence. The kids don't know that they don't know about money. It's not something they realize the importance of. It's not something they realize the value of. They don't realize how critical this skill is. As grown-ups, we do, but for kids, this is an unconscious incompetence, and we really need to take that into consideration when we are talking to them about it, or when we are telling them that they need to be educated about the skill, because typically they're going to resist it, because again, it's an unconscious incompetence. So they don't know. They think, I have money, I know to spend it, what else is there to learn, right? But there is so much more. There is so much nuance. There's so much detail in it, and the more you can educate yourself about it, you're just going to be better equipped to deal with not only financial. I keep telling everyone, this is, if you think that teaching kids about money is about money, you kind of miss the point. It's about so many different things. It's about your mental well-being, it's about your health, it's about your career choices, it's about your relationship choices, it's about being self-reliant. It's not about money so much. It is about so much more. And that's why I am such a strong advocate for giving teens this kind of opportunity, because I think this skill really helps them, step up, stand out, and live a life on their own terms, which is what we want for our kids, which is what I want, which is what everybody wants for their kids. And I think that is why I started this, the Kfi Global, just to further this vision.
Yeah, I mean, I read this somewhere that financial freedom leads to freedom of doing whatever you want, and which eventually leads to philosophical freedom. So, you're free to do what you want and think what you want rather than being a slave to money. And I think most people mistake financial freedom for acquiring a lot of money, but I don't think it is that. I think it's something which is very different. It buys you time to do what you want and what really, following your passion is one thing, but it's not something that I completely agree with. But yes, I mean, financial freedom can mean a lot more than just acquiring a lot of money. What do you think, Anselm? Is that something you agree with?
Oh, yeah, I mean, so I agree, and with and I'll just come to that in a minute. I mean, the poll question was an interesting one in terms of what do you what do your children think about credit cards? I'm going to sort of address that a little, yeah, because especially with my kids, I know they've seen me use a credit card and sort of go to the store and pay for things. For them, it's like there's no correlation to actual work and money. Is yeah, here's a card. It's almost magical in nature. You tap it and things get paid for. Um, they don't get the concept of uh, what happens, for you to be able to actually spend that money. And uh, a lot of the time, when you look at the way uh, kids generally either purchase or look at shopping and have those attitudes, if you don't have a conversation with them that, look, I mean, a credit card does not mean that you have free money. It's not a sort of a gateway to just go and spend whatever you need. Being able to sit down and talk to them about how that sort of actually works. You have an income. That income you need to be able to spend within those sort of needs and means. I think just like what Marilyn said, I mean, you need to have those conversations with them, treat them as adults, in a manner that they understand. One thing that we do as parents is tend to oversimplify things when it comes down to our children,
I think
which
I
is
think
not.
we are trying to be protective of our kids, on
Yes.
certain
And
to a certain extent. But on that note, can we have the results of the last poll, please?
yeah,
Okay, so 50%, which is the largest group, think that it's a useful tool if used wisely and paid off each month. I think this question should be more what the parents think the teen's perspective is, rather than what the teen's perspective is. Because
yeah.
in my experience, most adults actually still don't know how credit cards work. So how are they going to educate their kids? So I think it's something that is I feel needs more and more education, and there's a complete lack of it.
Could I just
I
jump
just
in
want to
here
say to
for a
our
second?
attendees is that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Sorry, Madeline, go ahead.
I was just saying that in these last 5 years, I've had the privilege of teaching so many kids, right from 10 years old up to 22, 23 years old. And I can tell you that when we have our lesson on credit cards, everyone their jaws are slack, like, I had no idea. What are you saying? And I'm telling you this with every single batch I've done. I've had kids who've had platinum credit cards. They had no limit on them. They showed me, they're like, there's no limit on the card. These kids hadn't seen a statement. They didn't know what a statement was. I had to explain to them that when you buy something, they actually send you, they're like, oh, wow, that would have been helpful. You see, they've never seen a statement before. They didn't know about the charges on the card. There are so many things that you should know about a credit card. It's a useful tool, yes, if you know how to use it wisely. If you don't, it can be the one tool that actually derails your future, right? And I can tell you that, and I'm talking about kids who are, finance students or commerce students or business and accounting students, and they come into the program thinking, I already know this. This is going to be a breeze. I already know this because I'm a finance student. I'm studying corporate finance. I'm studying business, and at the end of the program, they're just kind of shocked because they're like, I cannot imagine going through life not having known this, and how scary would that have been? And that is another a big problem. I think we tend to assume that our kids know things. Again, it's a desirability bias. We want to see what we want to see, right? So we tend to assume that our kids know these things. And I get this feedback from a lot of parents whose kids come to the program. They're like, I never realized how much my kid didn't know. I thought my kid knew this. I assumed that they know this. And that is one thing I think we really need to be quite careful about, because remember, this isn't being taught in schools, in colleges, in high schools, in universities. a handful of them try to do this. It's not done well enough. And again, they don't have the resources, that they aren't trained to do this. This isn't a subject that's evaluated and tested, and hence nobody really pays much attention to it. So you have to understand that kids aren't getting this education. They really aren't. So a lot of the times we assume our kids know this, like they know how to use a credit card, they know the charges on. I can tell you, it is quite a shocking, the truth is quite shocking, when you have, almost 19, 20, 21-year-olds actually being quite clueless about what it means, even how to read a statement. I mean, I know a lot of adults who don't know how to read a statement, but since we're talking about teens here, let's just stick to that conversation. These teens have no idea on what it is like to read a statement. What is the amount that they should pay? A lot of them think minimum balance is what they owe, and what's wrong with that? And that is when there's a slippery slope. It goes downhill from there. So it is something I think we should be paying a little more attention to.
Absolutely, absolutely. On that note, can we go to our next poll quickly? Okay, while everyone's answering the question, so I mean, why is it that educational institutions don't think it's necessary to teach kids about money? I mean, we are learning subjects that most of the time we don't end up using, in our real lives, but money is such an important factor of our lives, and plays such an important role. Why is it that it's not part of the education system? Have you had any thoughts on that?
I've had thoughts. I don't have an answer, because to me, I find it inexplicable. I find it ridiculous. I don't see why this can happen and how we are allowing it to happen. I think things are beginning to change, but you have to understand that with academia, the rate of change is glacial. So by the time we actually see this implemented in the classrooms, it's going to be another couple of decades at the earliest. Even though there's a lot of talk about, yes, we should teach our kids this, and this is important, it's not actually happening on the ground. And in a few countries like the UK, where it is government mandated, it's a nominal subject. It's just there because it has to be covered because it's mandated by the government. It's not really done in a way that is effective. And the other part, Abhishek, over here is that when it's taught in schools, financial literacy tends to be taught as a math-based subject. And it's
Right.
not a math-based subject, so they think, oh, because you have this in an allowance, and if you spend this, how much do it is not a math-based allowance. It is not about compound interest. I do, you mentioned compound interest, and when I do this, we just did a program for the Middlesex University kids, and not one of them, and I'm not picking on them. We're doing for all of these kids who are finance, accounting students, as I mentioned. They can tell you the definition of compound interest. They can tell you how to calculate compound interest. But if you ask them, how does compound interest, do you see a relevance of compound interest in your life? And no, it's a concept in a maths textbook. You see, whereas we need to understand compound interest is something that's applicable in every aspect of our life. And this isn't brought, which is why I'm saying when financial literacy is taught to kids, it's taught in a way that's irrelevant. It's taught in a way that doesn't relate to the kids. It's taught in a way that's really boring. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of looking at a financial education textbook, for the few textbooks that are out there in some of the schools or countries that are doing this as part of the curriculum. You will really want to slit your wrists. It is so boring. It is so dry, bone dry, so boring, completely irrelevant. It's no wonder that kids don't want this. Like, okay, this isn't a subject I'm going to get marked on. It doesn't count. So why should I need to pay attention? It's so boring. And I think that's where we've lost them at hello, because we only get that one chance to get them interested in money. Because if you make the first experience really boring and dry, they're not going to come back. They'd be like, hey, I have the money. I know how to spend it. What else do I need to learn? And I think that is quite key. So even when the education system is trying to do it, I don't think they're doing it well enough. And the reason I'm so hard on them is because this isn't a skill that's a nice to have. This is a critical skill, right? Their lives actually, it's not an understatement to say that a child's life could depend on having this knowledge or not. We all know this. As grown-ups, we know this. So I guess my point is, how come we're still sitting on the sidelines, waiting for somebody else to be the star player in the game? These are our kids. No one else has as much a stake as we do. The schools don't, the kids don't understand it as well. As parents, I think it does fall to us. I mean, we've played educational football for some time now. We think it's the schools, we think it's the school's responsibility. The school throws it back to the parents and, cites lack of time and lack of funds and lack of resources. So between this educational football that's being played, who loses out? It's the teenagers who go through their lives, unfortunately, not having this critical skill. So rather than actually focusing on who's not doing what, I think we should actually just come together and do something. Make it a point to actually get this education, make it a point to give it to them, because the kind of change that uh, it affects in a student is just is amazing to see.
No, so you mentioned football, and there are so many sportsmen, who make money as
Yeah.
young teenagers, and they, by the time they're 35, they've retired, and now they
broke.
have no money left, and they've gone bankrupt. And I feel that it's an essential life skill that they've completely missed out on. And what do you think, Anselm? Is it something that we should strive to, try harder, push the schools harder to inculcate in their curriculums?
So I think, and as Marilyn said, when it comes down to school as a subject, it can be counterproductive in a sense. If as parents we do not sort of impress upon our children the importance that it has in life. Because when I spoke to my kids about learning more about money, their first reaction was, no, why? Like, no, it's important that you understand and learn about money. And they were disinterested. I mean, for them, they didn't even want to learn about it, and they didn't want to talk about it. But I think the important, and I'll share an incident, right? So my daughter, she's 15 now. I think a couple of years earlier, she was talking about currency. So when we are traveling, there's dollars, and dollars always seem so much more glamorous, and dirhams and dollars, and I get 3 dirhams for $1. And I sat down with her and we were discussing this, and for about an hour we were talking about foreign exchange. How does it work? Why it means, what it means. If one currency or the currency of one country is higher than the other, does it mean that that country is better off, or what the whole concept was? And when we are able to have those conversations in a manner that they can relate to, I think they open up. They're also interested. I mean, thinking about it, I don't think she would have sat down and listening to an hour-long lecture on finance from me, or from money. But because she was able to sort of relate to, given the fact that we're traveling, etc., she was quite open to, and she was asking intelligent questions as to, so for a 15-year-old, if she is able to sort of grasp that, because it sort of piqued her interest, I guess. If we make that interesting and impress upon our children as parents, that these are the impacts, or these are the reasons why it is sort of important. I think that then combined maybe with school, hopefully they improve the curriculum that they teach, but that probably will lead to some amount of change. But I think, as Marilyn said, responsibility lies, I would say, primarily with the parents. First off, as parents, we need to be literate ourselves. We have to take the time to invest in learning, understanding. And I'll give you a simple example. Compound interest, you mentioned that. Einstein said it's the 8th wonder of the world. But like anything that is great and useful, it has its flip side. I mean, you have,
your debt can compound as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at credit cards, they use the power of compounding against you. I mean, essentially, in a way, right? I mean, it's compound interest that is actually impacting your life and I like to tell my children, that's an atomic bomb. If you don't know how to use it, you don't know how to manage it, just like nuclear power can be used for good. So on the other side, on the flip side, it sort of, so then that sort of interests them. Okay, what do you mean? So those, I think, to come back to the point, make it interesting for the children first, make them want to learn about it, and then sort of get them into the different programs.
So on that note, do you think there are some mistakes generally, Marilyn, that you come across where parents make when they're talking to their kids and teens about money? Do you see some patterns in that aspect?
I think there are a few which I'd like to talk about. The first one, I think, and before I get into mistakes, I want to say that as parents, we we mean well, we do our best, we mean well, but there are a couple of things that we just don't know so much about. None of us had this education, so financial education wasn't a thing when we were growing up. So we don't know, we haven't had a formal education, so it becomes difficult for us to talk to kids about it. Also, between keeping our kids fed, alive, and out of trouble, we really don't have much of a mental bandwidth to sit down and then talk to them about dealing with money carefully. So I guess I want to say I understand where we're coming from, where parents come from when we are a bit hesitant to do this. And also, maybe another thing we should take into account is the proximity bias. I mean, our teens don't listen to us. Everybody who has teens, we should accept that. Our teens really don't listen to us because it's the proximity bias, right? We are too close to them for them to see value. Now, the same thing, if they hear from an unbiased source, if they go for a class or they hear it from their teacher, they'll be like, oh my God, you have no idea what I learned today. And you'll go like, hang on, I told you the same thing every single day. You had no reaction, but your teacher said, and that's exactly what I mean by proximity bias. We are too close to our kids. The sooner we get used to it, the better it is. And we realize that maybe for some things that they're best, it's better off them getting an education or getting this training from an unbiased professional source. They also tend to open up more. They tend to talk more. They tend to share. So it makes a huge difference. When it comes to, I guess, damaging mistakes, the first thing I'd like to focus on, which in my experience is the worst, is we don't realize the value of an early start. Right? We don't realize how important it is for us to teach our kids about money right now, irrespective of what age they are. If they can say, I want, that's the time to start talking to them about money. Money is a different language. Just like, if you had a kid who was like 10 years old, and if you had someone who was 25 years old or 40 years old, who do you think would learn a language quicker? It's obviously the children, because it's hardwired in their systems, right? And money is just another language. That's why the younger we teach our kids about money, the better they are at it, the more time they have to practice. It actually gets hardwired in their system. It's a lot more impactful as well. And more importantly, let's come back to compound interest. They get to harness they get to harness the force of compound interest as much as possible, as early as possible. And you can't beat that, right? There are a lot of people who started working when they were 11 years or 15 years old, but only Warren Buffett actually was able to harness the power of compound interest, right? So it is not just a fact. And I know there's a lot of talk now because UAE has now given visas to kids to start working, work permits, and there's a lot of excitement that that's going to teach them the value of money. I really doubt it. Let's not jump to that conclusion. I worked for a decade and a half before I realized the value of money, before I realized that there's a smart way to spend, there is a smart way to, intelligent way to use your paycheck. And so let's not assume that just because our kids are, just because our kids have jobs and are earning money, let's not assume that it's a logical conclusion that therefore they are going to be smart about money and make smarter decisions. So that is one. The second thing I would like to say is that I think as parents, we tend to focus more on tactics and on strategy. For example, we'll be like, okay, how much allowance do I give my kid? Do I give my kid a credit card, a debit card? All of these things are great, but they're all very tactical. What we need to do is think a little more strategically about it. So when I say strategically, I mean, give them a holistic education around money, get their mindset developed, get them to develop a proper money mindset. Nothing is as important as getting your mindset developed. As Tony Robbins says, any new skill you learn, 80% of it is psychology, 20% is tactics. So when we are focusing on credit cards or debit cards or allowances, that's all very tactical and all well and good, but let's spend a little more time talking to them more strategically. And the last one, which I'd like to bring up is, nowadays, especially with social media, with peer pressure, a lot of kids are into investing in cryptocurrency and deciding. They're very interested in the topic of investing. I mean, it's a sexy topic. So obviously no one wants to talk about saving and budgeting. Everybody wants to talk about investing. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that's a great thing. And we should be talking to our kids about investing, because that is where wealth generation actually begins, right? It's not in the savings. You're never going to save your way to wealth. You are going to invest your way to wealth. So as important as it is for kids for them to learn this, we have to be very, very careful. Financial education has to be a precursor to investing, because if it isn't, then that's a recipe for disaster. You see, investing is like the roof of a house. If you try to put the roof of a house without building strong walls and strong foundation, that really, it's a disaster. just waiting to happen. And unfortunately, that is what's happening with a lot of the kids today, with a lot of organizations who are teaching kids how to trade, teaching kids how to invest. These kids don't understand the difference between a debit and a credit. They don't understand the cost of credit. They don't understand what it means to budget. They don't understand what an emergency fund is or how do you fund it. All of these basic things are not in place. And yet we go to them and we're talking to them about stocks and trading and investing. I don't know how this can be allowed. The fact that it is allowed and widespread is a whole different question. But at least for all of those listening, I really implore you to, before your kids, before you start talking to them about investing, you need to give them a good grounding in smart money management, because otherwise they're just going to go down the route of fall for every get rich quick scheme, fall for influencers. They're now finfluencers apparently, who are on TikTok or whatever, who are telling our kids where to invest. Now, the fact that these are paid advertisements, the fact that these influencers know absolutely nothing about the investments that they are so glibly endorsing, right? The fact that everything that they're telling you is antithetical to long-term wealth building somehow doesn't seem to make a difference, right? We can't expect them to regulate themselves. We can't expect the industry or the platforms to regulate. So it comes down to us. When I say regulate, I mean educate first. Your kids will regulate themselves after that. And I've seen that with all the teams that we are doing. Once they understand the program, they understand the basics. I keep telling them, so how would you feel now if I had, if we had directly started teaching you about investing? They're like, we would never have got it. It just wouldn't have made any sense to us. And that is something I think if I had to choose the top three, those are the top three I would choose.
That's I think most parents would resonate with something like that. Can we have the results for the last poll, please? Okay, so that's an interesting result. 58% of parents think that kids think about money, it comes from work, and money is important and requires careful management. So I think most people are on the same page that it definitely doesn't grow on trees. And most people also think about money all the time. So yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in there. With my children, definitely not. For them,
but again, this is
I think, you know what,
I
think we should have had a third option there that might not grows on trees. I mean, everybody knows money doesn't grow on trees, but I know a lot of kids think that it comes out of an ATM. So maybe that should have been an option.
Yeah. They don't think too much about where it comes from, very honestly. At least they know, dad's working, and that's about it. They don't know much more than that, I guess.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with you, Anselm, in terms of in all of my experience and the kids that I've taught, thousands of them, they really don't think about it it's not something that it's an unconscious incompetence. Again, it comes to that part. It is not their fault. It's just something that is not taught, not broached about. So that's why we tend to assume that they do know a lot, but there is so much more that we can do to make sure that they are learned.
Right. So on that note, Anselm, as a dad, what have you done for your kids? How have you prepared for their future planning, education planning? What is it that you do if you made any mistakes? If you could share some, insight with us.
Plenty of them. As much as. But before I go into that, I'm just going to sort of touch on one thing from the previous question that you mentioned. I mean, that I think is important, not just as parents, but I think as society. Finish the sentence for me. Money is the root cause of. So if that is the attitude and mindset we are going to carry, and if that's, that then lends itself into so many aspects of life that we'll never be able to sort of have a genuine conversation about money. I mean, money is a tool. It's something that we can utilize in whichever way, whether it's for good or for bad. But I just wanted to sort of add that as parents, it's important for us to also create a positive belief system about money within our children. Sorry. So getting back to your question, yep. And I'm going to come back to you to answer this because, of course, you're a financial advisor. You've been working with many clients, and you have a of course, seen many more either good or bad decisions that parents have made with regard to planning for their children. I think for me, the number one mistake was not starting early or not starting early enough. It is, I mean, think about it like this. From the time that a child is born till the time that they turn 18, and there's 216 months. Now, whatever age your child is today, you take that and deduct the number of months, and you'll have the number of months left for your child to go to college or for higher education typically. And if you haven't started soon enough, you're going to be sort of building a deficit in terms of the amount of time that you'd have. So not starting early enough is one. And then, the second trap that probably I fell into is when I did realize that, okay, I need to start, then I was like focused on the time that I'd lost. So the best time to start is now. I think that's the lesson that I learned a little, maybe a little too late in my own opinion. That said, from a planning perspective, Abhishek, I'm going to ask you to sort of, to probably give us the best practices or a framework that, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, in my experience, I've seen, all sorts. I have seen people who've started planning from the day that children are born, or sometimes even before the children are born. I've seen grandparents think of their grandkids and invest early for them. Whereas I also see people who all of a sudden realize that their kids need to go for higher education. Mostly in Dubai, you see a lot of kids want to go to the United States or the UK for education. And most people don't know the costs of their education. They assume a number in their heads and they don't bother to find out. And again, that is because of our innate nature of not trying to avoid the topic of money as much as possible. So, and they don't research. So they think, oh yeah, it's fine. They'll go for education. They'll be fine. I'm like, but do you know how much college tuition is in the US? Do you know how much with lodging it will cost you? And the lack of awareness is shocking. They are so focused on paying school fees and everything today. And, sometimes they lose sight of that. So 90% of my job is of making them aware. And I've seen it myself. My sister went for higher education to the United States and we saw the expense. And, I know for a fact that this is what, even with a scholarship that you will have to shell out every year. And it's not small change by any reason. So, I mean, I think start early. I think, kids are great. And, everyone is so passionate about having kids and having a family looking after them. But, in the day-to-day life, they lose sight of these things that they need to plan for. And the idea is that you not only save, you invest, because saving without investing is pointless. And when I say invest in your child's skills, invest in their extracurricular activities, not about only financial investing. Invest in the child in such a way that they are capable adults, capable of looking out for themselves, looking after themselves. They understand the value of money. So even if you send them, you pay the first 2 years tuition, they find enough, they understand and they find a way to pay for the rest of the 2 years. So, I mean, but as a financial advisor, my job is to tell them to save and invest and make them aware. And, then you can't force people to take action. So the action at the end of the day, it comes from inside, I mean, I can only make you aware. So yeah, that's usually my experience in this.
Yep. Very interesting. Thank you.
All right. I think we should go to questions now. We have little time left. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, we have our first question. What if my finances are a mess? How do I teach my kids or teens? Now, who would like to take this? Because it's not going to be me.
Okay, I'll take this one because I don't know what the next one is. So at least I know what it. All right. So I guess my advice here would be don't think too much about it, and take that step anyway and talk to them about it. Because one of the things that we do in our program is we get the teens to go back to their parents and they have to ask them, what is the biggest money mistake you made? What was the biggest financial drawback that you've had and the biggest mistake you made? And I can tell you it's not easy for parents to talk about it, but we give them and we don't just give them one question. We actually train them in the art of digging up the whole story and coming to us with it. But I can also tell you that the kids learn from that. They learn, the best way to learn. Yes, your own experience is great, but it's so much smarter to learn from other people's experiences. And if you can learn from your parents' experiences and realize that, I have kids coming and saying, I don't know how my mom or my dad could have been so dumb. Like, what were they thinking? Now, to hear this from a 14 or a 15 or a 16-year-old, it is amazing, because for damn sure that that kid is not going to make that same mistake. And I've had parents come to me and say, my goodness, that exercise you've given my kids, like, it's been a year since the program and they still remind me, like, how could you have made that mistake? And I keep telling them, the fact that they're still talking about it a year later, really well that they're not going to make that mistake. So I don't think that we should let the fact that we made mistakes, all of us have made mistakes, one may be bigger than the other. We've all made stupid mistakes, but if we can talk to them about it, tell them why we made that mistake. And that's one of the questions that we train them to ask, like, okay, so it's not just what was your mistake, but what made you make that mistake? What put you in that position? Who did you go to for advice? Did you go to anybody for advice? How did that mistake make you feel? How old were you when you did that? How much do you think you lost? Now, when you get kids asking you these kind of questions and really, sort of getting the deeper story, they understand how it made you feel. They understand how long it took for you to get over it. So I think make use of it. Every parent is standing on a mountain of value. We really have so much value to give our kids. Now, the problem is they don't listen to us usually. Yes, I mentioned that before. But also, remember, when they're the ones asking the questions, they're listening. They're not listening when we are talking to them, because usually when we are talking to them, we are in lecture mode and we are saying, you should do this and you should be doing that. And teenagers, or any kids, I guess, the minute you switch into lecture mode, they're switching off. They're not listening, right? It's just like a blank stare. But when they're the ones asking the questions, they are paying attention. And also remember, kids may not listen to what you're saying, but they're watching what you're doing. So if you're not walking the talk and you're telling them something and doing something else, they're the first ones to call your bluff on that, right? So I think really, if this is a situation, we should be open and talk to them about it, make the most of it, make sure that this is a mistake that everybody learns from as well. I hope that's a good enough answer for
Yeah,
the question.
adding to that, I feel that, we human beings generally have a tendency of not accepting our mistakes. And I think the first thing is accepting that you've made a mistake, being open about it. And if you want, teenagers are smart today. So if you want them to, listen to you, you have to be honest with them. You have to, tell them honestly, and then you will find empathy. Because I think if you always, like you said, lecture them, and, it's from a higher moral standing at all points of time, it's not going to work. Nobody likes being lectured. So yeah, I think that's correct.
I think there's a question that's come up on the chat. Can you see that? From Jennifer
Yes, it
Colasso.
says, it's from Jennifer. She says, my kid is 12 and is already into making money through buying and selling die-cast cars and keeping abreast with gold rates since he has invested in gold with his own money. Do I continue to encourage him?
Sorry, can I jump in here? This is a
Absolutely.
question.
Please.
Okay, so definitely, it's a great thing that he's already doing that. He's already earning. He's found an opportunity to earn, which in my view is really important, and obviously doing something that he loves. But I would like to give a little bit of a cautionary note here. Before he gets into investing, like, and I know I've said this before, but just give him a financial education. Make sure his foundations are really right, because whether you're investing in gold or stocks or bonds, you really need to understand what investing really means, and there's a checklist that you should have before you even start investing. He's 12. I really doubt he understands that checklist. I would say that encourage the fact that he is making the money, because earning potential, that hunger to actually earn money is really great. But kind of insist that he gets a financial education as well, because I guess I want to put it this way. You wouldn't let your kids drive a car. Well, they know to drive, so they're taking the Ferrari out, right? You would insist that they do go for driving classes before they are allowed to drive. So the same way, before you start investing, or before you really, when you have your money, I think we should make it a requirement. You want an allowance, or then you really need to, you need to learn how to manage it, and you need to go for a class and a program that's going to teach you. Just in the same way as we wouldn't let you drive without driving classes, we're not going to let you do this without actually learning about it. And that, but other than that, Jennifer, I think you're on the right track in terms of, yes, please do encourage him. Just make it a little broader in terms of giving him some more information before he goes down that route.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. I mean, as a 12-year-old, I don't know what I was doing, but kids are definitely smarter today. It's all about evolution, I think. Okay, can we go to the next question? As a parent, what are the mistakes you think that can be avoided when planning for my child's education? I think Anselm, will you take that?
Yep, sure. I think the first thing that I would say is, and this is something that I've said, is start early, start as soon as you can. The second is sometimes we try to find the best plan. Very often it's okay, I want to get the plan that is best suited for that, and we end up not taking any action, or we delay that action, and then we're not satisfied about the plan that we've got. I think it's important first, yes, to do your research, to get a professional in if you can. There are many advisors available. Get somebody that you can rely on and trust. Get a referral from a friend if need be. And decide on a path, decide on a course of action, and act. The biggest mistake I think most people do is not take that action. Sometimes we get stuck in that decision paralysis, and we have too much of information. We think we know, we need to save every penny and squeeze the last percentage of return out from the savings plan, and we don't end up taking action. So that I think would be the biggest learning I would say that I would share with everyone.
Absolutely, I completely agree. We have time for one more question, so we're going to go to that. What is the right age to give your kids a credit card or an allowance?
Marilyn, that's for you.
I think I kind of answered this earlier.
I'm gonna say never give a credit card, but that's me. But
no, well, that's like saying don't use a knife because it could kill you, right? There are lots of beneficial reasons to use a credit card. You can start building your credit score. There are lots of reasons for kids to learn how to use a credit card wisely. So I think the right, first of all, talking to them about money would be the minute they start demanding things, the minute they start saying, I want, kids actually form their money mindset by the age of 7. So it's never too early to actually talk to your kids about money. When it comes to credit cards and things like that, I think you will know when they're ready for it. And I think definitely anyone over the age of 9, and we teach this to, the minimum age we accept is 9 years old, but 9-year-olds onward are very, very willing, able to learn and to implement what they're learning as well, just in terms of figuring out how to budget wisely, what to spend on. And that makes a huge difference. So yeah, that's a short answer.
All right. It reminds me of a quote from Spider-Man, which I always quote to my, my sister. So with great power comes great responsibility. So I think credit card is a lot of power in a teenager's or child's hand. So,
and I'll just add to that on the topic of responsibility, because I think that's something that I try and sort of a principle that I try and adopt when I'm looking and working with children or working with my kids, is the more responsibility you give them, the more responsible they will become. So yeah,
true, absolutely. All right, I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you for taking the time and helping some of our clients understand a little bit more. And I'm sure they'll reach out to you, because honestly, this has been very eye-opening for even me. Thank you, Anselm, for your time as well. For all the attendees, before you leave, there will be a survey that you'll have to go through. Please take a couple of more minutes, and thank you so much for attending the session.
Thank you, Abhishek.
There's just one more.
For all those who listened as well. Thank you. No?
There's one more question, which I'll just address because there's a question from an audience member as to how can they access this training and how can they get in touch with you, Marilyn. So the details are on the slide, or Marilyn, if you'd like to quickly give them that information.
Yeah, you can just go to our website, which is very simple. It's kfi.global. And on the website, there's a way you can connect with us. You can book a discovery call, or actually every Sunday we have from 7 to 8. I'm online here just to answer any questions that parents might have with regard to, questions. Bring your teen along because I know a lot of times you're going to have a resistance for them to attend the program. Bring them along, let them ask the questions, and let them see if this is something that would be right for them. I'm the first to say our program's not for everybody. We're also quite careful about, because we have a very high success rate with the teens that we work with. We have a 95% success rate. So we also like to talk to teens before that to make sure that this program is right for them. It's just not just one way. So, just go onto our website, book a discovery call with us, and email me at marilyn@kfi.global. That's MARILYN, marilyn@kfi.global. And I'll be happy to send you the link to join the meeting. And we do this every Sunday. So for all of the Sundays in October, including tomorrow, we'll be online. So happy to answer any questions and help you out if there's any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you. Thanks, Marilyn.